Everyone would like to live longer, better lives. But there are some who are even more ambitious, pinning their hopes on the science of the future. They dream of a life without end.
We expect that in the future, someone who would be considered legally dead by today's criteria would not be considered dead by the criteria used 100 years from now.
Up until now, we've all had to accept that life is a fleeting thing. We're born, we reach our peak, and then we age and die. But many now believe that science is about to set us free. They aim to stay forever young, and not just in spirit. But what impact will this have on the so-called natural order of things? As disease becomes a thing of the past and human lifespan increases, we'll be living in a world increasingly populated by old people, where there is less room for the young.
Lori, 72 years young. Lois, 64 years young. Roseanne, 77 years young.
In Sun City, Arizona, a community of 45,000 is run by the old, for the old. As more and more of us survive into old age, this could become the model for cities everywhere.
Sun City is a city of life, a city of volunteers, and it's a retirement community where the seniors can come and spend their life and enjoy the rest of their life.
Sun City is an impressive place to live. You can join any of the 142 recreational clubs offering anything from racquetball to roller skating, ceramics to computers. There are 7 recreation centers, 2 bowling alleys, 8 golf courses, and lakes for fishing and boating. You can watch films and plays or hear a symphony orchestra. Something for everyone. The only catch is you have to be at least 55 to live here.
We wish you a happy birthday. May your few.
The Sun City residents are having the time of their lives amongst like-minded people of the same age group.
Fill your life with
The people in it make the community, and it's just a great place to live. Heaven on earth. There's no other way to describe it.
But heaven on earth comes to an end. Sun City can make the senior years happier and more fulfilling, but it can't put off the inevitable. Might humans one day learn how to live forever, or are we searching for the impossible? There are some organisms on the planet that can live for thousands of years. Giant sequoia and bristlecone pine trees are thought to live up to 5,000 years. However, scientists have discovered that their living cells are never more than 30 years old. They are constantly renewing themselves, but eventually the trees will die. Does anything in this world evade the Grim Reaper? The fruit fly lives the briefest of lives, a matter of days, and yet it could shed some light on the mysteries of human aging. Replicating earlier work in the field of aging, Professor Michael Rose and his colleagues painstakingly studied groups of up to 100,000 fruit flies to determine how age relates to death.
In aging, it's not just like you deteriorate, it's that you do so at an accelerating rate. It's not this slow, gentle thing, fading off into oblivion. It's a merciless assault that accelerates in intensity with age.
When Professor Rose's team examined the death data, they saw just what they expected. As the flies got older, the rate at which they died increased. But then the data revealed something else, something incredible.
The amazing thing is, it reaches a certain age and then stops, and then everything goes quiet. The mortality rate does not accelerate anymore, it just stays flat. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my career as a scientist. It's truly mind-blowing.
This led Professor Rose to conclude that aging actually stops in fruit flies. He believes that if all organisms are given the chance to go through their aging process and come out the other end, they too will stop aging. Of course, no longer aging when we're already very old isn't particularly appealing to humans. But what if the aging process could be halted earlier?
The human peak of survival capacity is between 10 and 15 years. That's when the human organism is most robust. If we had no aging and we stayed at that peak, you would live, say, 1,000 years, 1,200 years, instead of a piddling 75 years. I mean, isn't that staggering? I think it's staggering.
If aging does indeed stop in humans as well as fruit flies, then the dream is that one day scientists will come to understand how this happens. Then a 1,000-year lifespan could become a reality. While scientists struggle to make sense of this late life phenomenon in fruit flies, another simple organism might just hold the key to immortality. For years, a young Argentinian biologist, Dr. Daniel Martinez, played cook and nursemaid to these small life forms, freshwater Hydra, keeping them safe, clean, and well-fed so they had every chance of surviving into old age. He wanted to see just how long they could live.
If you ask most evolutionary biologists, they will say that it's impossible for an animal to be immortal. And that was what I believed, actually, at the time I started my experiments. I thought that I was going to demonstrate that Hydra underwent aging.
Hydra are simple creatures. Their bodies consist of a cylindrical tube. At one end, there is a foot. At the other, a mouth surrounded by tentacles. Yet, in evolutionary terms, Hydra are special. Very early on, they took a separate path from most other creatures in the animal kingdom.
What is very interesting about Hydra is the fact that they have very few cell types, approximately 20 cell types. And what is more interesting is that those cell types are basically stem cells.
Stem cells not only have the capacity to endlessly divide, they also have the ability to create any body part. In effect, they are the key to life, even our own. It is this fact which provides the improbable but essential link between human beings and a primitive life form that time forgot. Dr. Martinez collected a few Hydra from a pond and separated them into individual dishes. He then began to watch and wait to see how long they survived. It quickly became a full-time job. Hydra reproduce asexually every other day, so every other day, Dr. Martinez had to remove the offspring to be sure he was always observing the original Hydra.
So you feed them, you had to leave them there for approximately 4 or 5 hours. And they will regurgitate their food, the things that they haven't ingested. And then you had to wash them. That means you had to take them out, put them in a new dish, and clean the dish thoroughly, because otherwise you can kill them. So I had to do this every other day for 4 years.
Even a 3,000-mile move to the west coast of America couldn't separate Dr. Martinez from his charges. The Hydra simply went with him, traveling first class in a cool box and fed with their favorite food, fresh shrimp.
They needed to be fed, so that required that I hatch this shrimp in the middle of the desert, and that was quite complicated. So I ended up in some national parks, feeding Hydra on picnic tables and things like that, or in motels late at night.
After 4 years of painstaking observation, Dr. Martinez was convinced he'd answered the question of their mortality.
Animals that start to reproduce 5-10 days after they're born usually live 1 to 8 months. I had followed by that time Hydra for 4 years, so they have already outlived most other creatures that start to reproduce in such a short time. So to me, that was convincing evidence that there was something different about Hydra. So presumably they could keep going for another 4 years, who knows? So I think that, to me, that was indication that Hydra was immortal.
The Hydra are immortal because they are not the Hydra that they once were. During Dr. Martinez's 4-year period of observation, they completely renewed their bodies at least 60 times. And the secret of the Hydra's eternal youth lies in the fact they are made up almost entirely of stem cells. Humans are different. We exist as a group of stem cells only during the first 14 days after conception. And as scientists search for a solution to human mortality, they are beginning to find answers here, at this stage of development. Dr. Michael West is one of the pioneers of stem cell research.
If we think of how we develop from one cell, a sperm and an egg cell come together to form one cell. That one cell divides into 2 cells. We have this small little ball of cells that we call the early embryo. And then those cells then, about 14 days of development, branch out like the trunk of a tree branches out, forming all the cells and tissues that make a human being.
Each of our embryonic stem cells has the ability to become any tissue and organ within the human body. As soon as the mechanisms of development are triggered, our stem cells become specialists. Some become heart cells, some bone cells, some neurons, and so on. Once this building work has started, There's no going back. The stem cells' jobs for life have been decided. Or so it always seemed. Now, however, we have the awesome prospect of reversing this specialization. Dr. Michael West and his team have been able to recapture the power of the stem cell through nuclear transfer, a technology better known as cloning. Cloning allows scientists to create identical copies of animals. This pregnant cow in Iowa has been artificially inseminated. However, she's in for a surprise. Rather than giving birth to a calf, she'll be mother to a rare wild ox called a gaur. In this first cross-species experiment, scientists took an egg cell from an ordinary cow, removed the egg's DNA, and replaced it with a skin cell from a male ox. This contained all the genetic information needed to create a gaur. The egg cell was then placed into the cow, where it grew normally into a fetal gaur ox. But it's not just endangered species that could benefit from cloning. The implications for humans are far-reaching too.
Well, the magic about cloning is not so much about creating an identical copy to your favorite hunting dog or, cloning a sheep. The magic to a scientist is it tells us something completely amazing. We can take development, which is, a single cell forming an embryo, forming a baby, forming an adult human being, in reverse.
Holding an egg cell under the microscope, scientists remove the DNA. The egg now has the potential to make something, but has no instructions to follow, until the scientists reintroduce some DNA from another source.
We can take a cell from an adult human being, a skin cell maybe, cell we wipe off your lip, put it back into this little time machine, which is the egg cell, which is the cloning procedure, and make the cell young again. We've shown that not only does the cell forget that it was a skin cell and become an embryonic cell, aging is reversed in the cell as well. So what was once an old cell at the end of its lifespan is made young again. And of course the implications of that are rather profound for medicine. It means we could make anything for you, a new kidney, new heart tissue, all of which is young tissue.
Miraculously, nuclear transfer takes old cells back in time so that they become embryonic stem cells. Now they can grow into any cell, tissue, or organ in the human body, all of them tailor-made for the individual who supplied the DNA. This would mean new hearts, new kidneys, new livers, all without the danger of rejection. Even new brain cells, so that diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's could be consigned to history. Persuading the cells to grow exactly to plan still takes a little chemical coaxing, but Dr. West believes that science is close to mastering this technique.
We know what makes one of these primitive cells become a nerve cell or a muscle cell, and making them turn into those particular cells and tissues is pretty straightforward engineering.
Through cloning, old people could receive young cells, but at what expense? As scientists roll back the frontiers of knowledge, those concerned with the ethical and legal implications of each new discovery are struggling to keep up. If the cloning procedure that creates stem cells was allowed to fully develop, the result would be a cloned human being. Instead, development is arrested, so they will only grow into those parts that the scientists require.
The concern, of course, is what are we actually doing when we do that? Are we creating little microscopic human beings? that we're sacrificing for the benefit of an older patient. And that's the conundrum, the ethical debate.
Scientists may soon be growing supplies of neurons and skin cells in the laboratory, but what if they could persuade our bodies to repair themselves from within? Today, Dr. Doros Platica is taking the first steps in an emerging field called regenerative medicine.
I know when most people hear regenerative medicine, they think of science fiction, or at best they think of something that may benefit their great-grandchildren, but not themselves.
Believing that all our bodies have the power to regenerate, Dr. Platica and his team are searching for ways to activate that power. If they can unravel the complex switches that control this capacity, our bodies would have a greatly increased power to replace any part that's worn out, malfunctioning, or diseased.
The blueprint that made us, the human genome that people have now sequenced, and for the first time we have access to, that exists each and every cell of your body, serves as your own personal fountain of youth. That is the promise of regenerative medicine, to be able to activate the custom blueprint that exists in each and every cell to repair the damage that's been done through aging, trauma, degeneration, and restore you as good as new.
The blueprint is reactivated by different molecules. A molecule that can reactivate bone repair has already been found.
First and foremost among those is bone morphogenic protein 7. Its other name is OP1. And that's a molecule that stimulates bone repair regeneration and will be one of the first regenerative medicine products on the market to repair bone in people who've had a fracture that will not repair and otherwise will lose their leg or require autograft surgery.
Bone regeneration isn't the only thing that's on offer. Already, replacement bladders have been grown for children. But for the moment at least, the first stage of this procedure has to take place in the lab rather than the body.
We grow the bladder partially outside the body, and it's with your own cells. It's with your own stem cells, so there's no rejection. And for the next 11 months, it grows within the body, almost like a cake being made in the oven. I think that in the next 20 years, so within the period of a generation, there's going to be a complete revolution in the way we treat disorders associated with aging and loss of function. I think there's going to be a new specialty in medicine called regenerative medicine, in which the goal will be that people will continue functioning at their full function close to their death. So the ultimate would be that you will regrow on a constant basis anything that gets damaged. That's the ultimate dream, and you will be forever young and forever vibrant.
But what if your entire body is damaged? Is it possible to be totally rejuvenated? There are those who believe that whole-body transplants are anything but science fiction. As a quadriplegic, Craig Vitovitz has been confined to his wheelchair for the past 30 years.
I was pretty wild. Like motorcycles, had motorcycles, hot rods. Anything that had a motor on it, I would try and race it. I always loved speed. Even on skiing, going skiing, I would see how fast I could actually go. Always enjoying life, to the fullest, getting in trouble. I know people don't think that's much fun, but when you're a kid, that's about, you enjoy it quite a bit. But yeah, I was pretty rowdy and pretty reckless, real reckless at that.
But one day, back in 1971, Craig's carefree life was shattered.
I remember it was Father's Day. A couple friends were there, and we were swimming and that, and I was diving all day. And towards the end of the day, I dove, and I was tired, and Just before I hit the water, I had a strange feeling like I screwed up. My head caught the water before my arms did, and it shattered the cervical fourth vertebrae out of my neck. My friends that were there said I came to the surface and had a smile on my face. Then I went back down. They just thought I was holding my breath. So I was dead for about 6 minutes. And they took me out of the pool, and the ambulances came. Nobody knew I broke my neck. And I died once on the way into the operating room and once in the operating room. No one knows what it's like leading a full active life, at the spur of the moment, just doing what you wanted to do. And then all of a sudden, within a split second, you need help getting onto the bathroom toilet, getting into the shower, preparing your meals, getting a drink of water. You know, in a split second, your life has changed that drastically.
Although Craig has managed to keep his body in a good state of fitness, many quadriplegics face early death. While their brains remain fully functional, they can suffer from multiple organ failure. A brain surgeon in Cleveland, Ohio, Professor Robert White, believes that he has found a way to lengthen their lives. His work began in 1961 with monkeys, and at first it had a very different purpose.
The thing that fascinated me was whether or not we could actually isolate a highly encephalized or highly intelligent animal's brain, in this case the monkey. Never done before. And I talked to a number of experts throughout the country, and they said, no, you can't do it, because in the process of removing the brain, unlike the liver or kidney, you would damage it. You only have a few minutes to get it out and get it attached to something as far as its blood supply goes, otherwise it will simply die.
This was a major problem facing Professor White and his team, but they eventually hit on a solution.
And we said, well, the simplest thing to do is to take another large monkey, who obviously has a liver and a kidney and a pancreas and everything else, and a heart, of course, already functioning very, very well, and just hook up the isolated brain to the other animal. But in a sense, the fascination was that for a time when the experiment was running, the animal sitting in the chair and who was awakened from anesthesia had two brains, had its own and the spare one, if it needed it, sitting right outside.
This was the first in a series of experiments that would eventually lead to something far more ambitious, a brain transplant operation. Professor White decided that the best way to transplant a brain would be to retain it inside the animal's head.
So now what I was looking at was a head transplant or a total body transplant. Because under those circumstances, if I could be successful in mating the body to the head and have the brain awaken in the head, then I could demand that it see, hear, taste, smell, and even eat, and even move the muscles in and around the head. And so it was in this room, the very first successful total body, if one wants, or brain in a head transplant were done.
Professor White had taken the head from one monkey and transplanted it onto the body of another. Although the resulting monkey was unable to move because of the inability to reconnect the spinal cord, its brain was alive. There's a great unease about this sort of surgery. Isn't this the stuff of Frankenstein's monster?
I think before anybody has the right to form an honest opinion and to protest this type of experimentation, they should let themselves be paralyzed by injections for a year, become a total quadriplegic. Worse than that, go to full extreme and stay that way a year.
Ghoulish or not, it is experiments such as these that give hope to quadriplegics like Craig. Meanwhile, the success of this groundbreaking operation convinces Professor White that a similar transplant on a human is possible.
A lot of people have suddenly become interested in the monkey work, raising the question, could it be done at a human level? In other words, could we do a total body transplant in the human? And as I did with the monkeys, I've gone back to the drawing board to see about the possibilities of such an operation. I've also done additional dissections here at the medical school and in the autopsy laboratories, because we're talking about a neck operation. It doesn't require much more than a neck operation. So this is very, very familiar anatomical territory for the ordinary neurosurgeon, that is the cervical or neck area of a patient. The equipment is ready, and the facilities could be put together very rapidly.
Craig holds on to the hope that scientists will learn how to reconnect the spinal cord. However, there is a chance that his existing body might not be able to cope with the reconnection, in which case he'd consider a total body transplant.
If it came to the point to where, yes, they could reconnect the spinal cord and have everything working close to 100%, yes, I would have the body transplant.
If scientists perfect the reconnection of the spinal cord and full-body transplants, the quality of life for quadriplegics like Craig will dramatically improve, and the technique could be extended. Full-body transplants might even mean that old people could adopt younger bodies. Who knows what will be considered possible or desirable? On the evidence of the recent past, advances in science and medicine can only gather pace, and there are those who are prepared to make all the necessary arrangements to travel forward in time to enjoy the benefits. One such would-be time traveler is Christine Peterson.
I'm willing to do a certain amount of investment in my health. I have health insurance, I have disability insurance, I have an excellent physician. I'd make an effort. So when I found that there was a way to, in essence, have access to future medical care today, I was pretty intrigued by that. So the way I look at it is, it's just another form of health insurance.
In Arizona, a company called Alcor is ready to meet that demand. In their search for immortality, Alcor's members are willing, upon death, to have their bodies frozen in a state of cryonic suspension. Entombed in liquid nitrogen, they're theoretically protected from further biological deterioration. Eventually, these modern-day time travelers hope to be reanimated by future medical technology. Fred Chamberlain, president of Alcor, candidly admits that there are no certainties in life or in death.
What we're really basically doing is saying that there's an alternative, and the alternative is very much like a plane that you know is going to crash into a cliff, and you jump out with an unproven parachute. You don't know if the parachute's going to work. On the other hand, if it's perfectly clear, the plane is just going to smash into the cliff and blow up. Some people might be more inclined to take their chances with jumping out.
Alcor member Ralph Merkel subscribes to this uncertain future.
Clearly, one of the advantages of cryonics is that it provides a mechanism by which we today can take advantage of future medical technology. It's like a trip to the hospital, except the hospital in this case is not located a few miles away, it's located a few decades in the future.
That journey into the future starts here in Alcor's operating room. On being pronounced clinically dead, Alcor members undergo cryoprotection and then freezing. The process takes several days, as Linda Chamberlain, director of Alcor, explains.
We basically have two teams here. We have our surgical team, and we have our perfusion team over here. What we're trying to accomplish is to replace about 75% of the body water with special protective chemicals so that the freezing damage is either eliminated or minimized in order to give them the best protection. There's usually about 4 people on the surgical team, 2 surgeons, a surgical nurse, and on the perfusion team we have from 2 to 4 people manning the computer, the refractometers that determine the amount of these special chemicals that are going into the patient. Usually the surgery can last anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 hours, depending on what kind of surgical problems the surgeons run into. And the cryoprotection usually takes from about 2 to 6 hours. After the patient has been cryoprotected, they then need to have their temperature lowered down to that of liquid nitrogen for long-term storage. Liquid nitrogen is minus 196 Celsius or minus 320 Fahrenheit. But you can't put a person in liquid nitrogen at that temperature immediately because they are much warmer. They're about 300 degrees warmer. So the first thing that has to happen is they go into this insulated container in order to start bringing their temperature down. The temperatures have to be taken down very, very slowly so that we don't have thermal differentials and cracking problems. This is designed to give our patients protection when they're placed into the liquid nitrogen. First, they're placed into a cushioned bag like this, which always remains saturated with liquid nitrogen. That way, even if they have to be transferred and they're taken up out of the liquid nitrogen, this will remain saturated so the patient is never without liquid nitrogen around them to protect them temperature-wise. Then they're placed into an aluminum pod so that the patient, even though for the long-term storage there are 4 patients in one of those very large containers, the patient is very well protected from any kind of physical contact or that kind of thing. This is our long-term patient care bay. This is where our patients wait perhaps for decades for the possibility of nanomedicine and advanced medical techniques to be able to repair what they might have died from. And obviously nobody who does this wants to come back and still be ravaged with age. So one of the very important parts of our entire philosophy is that if it is ever possible to repair and resuscitate these patients, they're going to want to be young again and free of the aging that they had experienced before they went into biostasis.
To fulfill their dreams of being young again, some of Alcor's members, like Christine Peterson, see their own bodies as being disposable.
I'm not interested in bringing my poor diseased body into the future. Let's just start fresh. What I'm interested in preserving really is my brain.
Those who choose to merely preserve their heads can enjoy the benefits of more advanced freezing techniques.
People who are signed up for neuro will probably get better brain preservation, more likely to retain their memories and identity than people who are not given this procedure, who are more likely to wake up like an amnesia victim.
We have 39 patients. All of our patients right now are in these 4 doers, and we have a couple of our neuro patients in here. This is kind of a temporary holding until we can get them transferred into the long-term storage.
So convinced are the people from Alcor of this path to immortality, all their staff are required to sign up for biostasis. Some have also had their relatives put on ice.
As a matter of fact, everyone who works here at Alcor has to have arrangements to have this done for themselves. As part of the reason we know that everyone who works here has the right incentive. Not only do most of us have very dear friends and family members who are being cared for here, but we all know that we will be our own customers one day. My mother was placed into biostasis in 1990, and she happens to be in this particular capsule right here. My father-in-law is also in this capsule. He was placed into biostasis in 1976, and that was actually the first person that Alcor placed into biostasis.
Just how do the people in cryonic suspension expect to be reanimated? They believe that as the whole recipe for life exists in the DNA, scientists of the future will have all the necessary information to rebuild their bodies. So instead of being buried, why not give yourself the opportunity to be examined by a doctor in the year 2150? After all, he might not be as quick to pronounce you dead when you emerge from your cryonic suspension. Ralph Merkel believes that we should think very carefully about just what it means to be dead.
Today's definition of legal death and the future definition of medical death are two very, very different things. We expect that in the future, someone who would be considered legally dead by today's criteria would not be considered dead by the criteria used 100 years from now.
Some visionaries believe that in the not-too-distant future, medical emergencies will be a thing of the past. Instead, our bodies will be constantly maintained through advances in nanotechnology.
The term nanotechnology is just about anything down at the nanoscale, which is a billionth of a meter. Nanotechnology is the ability to build physical structures with atomic scale precision.
These physical structures could be as small as 1/80,000th of the diameter of a human hair, yet their capabilities will be enormous.
Disease and ill health are caused largely by damage at the molecular and the cellular level. But today's surgical tools are too big to deal with that kind of problem. In the future, with nanotechnology, we'll have surgical tools that are molecular, both in their size and their precision. And for the first time, we'll be able to deal directly with the fundamental causes of ill health.
Imagine shrinking an entire hospital down to this size and then setting it afloat inside you. It could give you 24-hour nursing care, diagnosing and repairing your body as it does the rounds. This is the dream of nanomedicine.
What we'll be able to do in the future will be to inject small medical nanorobots or nanobots into your circulatory system where they would float around and they could do good things.
The nanobots will talk to each other about your condition and send information back to a computer and an awaiting physician. Your doctors will then be able to order the nanobots to deliver treatment at the cellular and molecular level with absolute precision.
If you had cancer, nanobots could identify and eliminate the cancer cells, or they could eliminate bacterial infection or other unwanted intruders into the body.
But you needn't be sick to reap the benefits of nanomedicine. Some enthusiasts see nanobots as sort of health vigilantes, patrolling our body systems to ensure we stay in perfect condition all the time. And that's not all. Artificial red blood cells containing 100 times more oxygen than normal could allow us to run for 15 minutes on one breath or sit underwater for hours. We could even upgrade our minds by implanting the contents of an entire library into our brains. We could, in effect, become superhuman. It seems likely that future medical advances will mean that the diseases of old age will hold no fears for us. Able to renew our bodies at will, we'll have gained the secret of eternal youth. But not quite. There is one organ we cannot replace, not without losing our memories and personality. It's the organ that contains the very essence of our being, the brain. Professor Leonard Hayflick believes that a quest for immortality is ultimately limited by the lifespan of the brain.
I don't think that science will be able to arrest the aging process. The way we do it with our automobiles is to replace parts. And the way we can theoretically do it in humans is also to replace parts. There are several parts, one in particular, that we probably will never want to have replaced, and that's our brain. If it were possible to replace our brain, you wouldn't be the same person you are. So what would be the point of replacing it?
But what if we could take all the information that makes us who we are and put it on a computer before our brain dies?
If I could have my brain uploaded to a computer and then downloaded to one or more new computers, I certainly wouldn't want to be sitting there looking out of my monitor when a drop-dead gorgeous woman walked by and I was left there simply with a hard disk and a small mouse.
But perhaps we wouldn't have to spend very long staring out of our monitors before a more user-friendly solution freed us. The ultimate in life extension could be to upload our brain's contents from a holding computer to an entirely new brain, one free from any memories, feelings, or personality of its own. For the present, this idea belongs firmly in the world of science fiction. But what is certain is that today, scientists are taking serious steps to slow down our aging process so we can enjoy longer, healthier lives.
I think that basic lessons in biology teach us that there need not be a limit to human lifespan. If we can make a cell in the laboratory not age, we probably can engineer people not to age, at least not aging the way we do today.
So whether we like it or not, science is set to have an increasingly large impact on our health and lifespan. As the search continues to hold back the years, extending our lives could have a profound impact on society. Scientists like Professor Tom Kirkwood urge caution.
If we could scientifically achieve an abolition of the aging process, then we would have to think pretty carefully about how we would manage population size. I mean, if we could all live indefinitely, well, we would pay a price because we would certainly have to limit our reproduction. But if we look to a hypothetical future world in which the aging process is abolished, we can see that, sort of the balance between how long we live as individuals, how many children we can afford to have without huge growth in population size, will all change profoundly.
Do we really want to create a world where there are few children? A place devoid of new ideas and talent? Where would the next Einstein, Picasso, or Elvis Presley come from? As the idea of immortality lures us on towards the prospect of an endlessly happy future, we would do well to consider these questions. Once, immortality was a gift that only the gods had the power to bestow. Soon, we may possess that power too. But tampering with evolution could be a dangerous game. Do we really want to live forever? Or should we be content to exit the stage gracefully when our part has been played?